Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we're looking at Living on Earth, Forests, Corals, Consciousness, and the Making of the World by Peter Godfrey-Smith. This is the third and brand new book in the Peter Godfrey-Smith trilogy, which includes Other Minds, The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness, and Metazoa, Animal Minds and the Birth of Consciousness. This particular copy of Metazoa is a UK print because the original title is Metazoa, Animal Life and the Birth of the Mind, and features a leafy sea dragon, whereas this one has the weedy sea dragon and the crayfish. Now, it might not seem like it, but I think that Peter Godfrey-Smith really puts careful thought into the titles of his books. These titles really should give you a good idea of what you're getting, especially when you know that Peter Godfrey-Smith is a philosopher, and he's known as the Australian scuba diving philosopher. So I have to admit that from the beginning, I've had a bias towards this guy, and over his 3 books, I've grown to like him more than ever. A couple of years ago, I read this other book by a different author whose title involved octopuses and consciousness, and I found that book to be a little disappointing, but it did lead to me discovering Other Minds. I read that, and not only did the book deliver based on what could reasonably be expected from reading the cover, but I found that I also tend to agree with pretty much all of the philosophical stances that the author takes. So when I saw this book, I was pretty excited. By the way, I would like to thank Jeanette from Browser's Bookstore in downtown Olympia. I went on a trip to Olympia recently, and when I got to the hotel, I typed in bookstores near me, and Browser's Bookstore was about 2 blocks away from the hotel. Awesome. So I went there. I asked Jeanette a question about a book, a question to which a dishonest salesperson would have seen as an opportunity to try to make a sale, but she gave me an honest answer, which I really appreciate, though it did mean that I wasn't going to buy the book that I asked her about. So I definitely wanted to buy something to show support, and Living on Earth by Peter Godfrey-Smith was the book that I left that store with. So thank you to Jeanette, and if anyone watching ever goes to Olympia in Washington, you definitely want to check out Browser's Bookstore. So then, Peter Godfrey-Smith is a philosopher, but his topics of discussion are rooted very strongly in biology. He explores all the philosophical ideas with a focus on the ways that biology diversified throughout the history of life on Earth. Topics like sensation and how the rise of different forms of sensation allowed life to begin affecting its own environment to ever increasing degrees, and how that in turn affects life in ongoing cycles, the organism's own life, as well as the other organisms that share the particular environment. Another theme that is discussed at length in this book is ethics, especially in how we treat animals. Evolution has bestowed Homo sapiens with enormous potential to affect our environment, and Peter Godfrey-Smith explores the responsibilities that come with that toward each other and other animals, but with a particular emphasis on toward the future. This book has a very broad scope in any dimension that we want to look at. To me, when reading this book, it felt like I'm looking at life as it is today as this thing interacting with itself, constantly changing, blossoming versions of itself over vast periods of time, over very diverse and changing environments. Time playing such an important role as the Earth has seen such an incredible explosion of biological diversity over the eons, and the complexification of this thing that started out with such humble and relatively simple beginnings. Today we see all these different ways of sensing the environment, and we see a plethora of different ways that living has developed. I'm talking about things like the different cellular pathways for photosynthesis in bacteria and plants, chemosynthesis, heterotrophs and autotrophs, cellular respiration, fermentation, etc. All of these things are manifestations of the interactions of life with itself based on the laws of the universe. And these things themselves have caused major changes in the environments they're found in. All of these things, these expressions of life, as well as abiotic factors that they influence, have some kind of effect on each other. What I mean is, For example, the Earth's atmospheric oxygen wasn't always 21%. Anyway, Smith is a philosopher looking at the natural world and the biology of it. And as a diver, his biological specialty is marine life. So there's a big bonus for readers who love the sea. There's also a bit good of neuroscience in this book. But if philosophy is your thing, I think you'll really like this guy. He talks a lot about life and self. Something I thought was really intriguing was his examination of modular beings versus unitary beings. The concept of self becomes even more complicated when looking at something that can do asexual reproduction by budding, like some cnidarians or plants or bacteria that divide by binary fission. To try to relate that to humans, the split brain patients with a severed corpus callosum allow us to look into some very interesting questions which confuse the idea of the self, turning a unitary being into something more like a modular being. I can also tell you that Living on Earth is very much like the other books in this trilogy. A number of concepts and points are revisited in this new book, and in some ways it does kind of feel like you're reading the same book, and for me, I do mean that in a good way. I think Peter Godfrey-Smith is a very bright person with interesting and valuable ideas. Again, I do have this bias towards the guy. Like the other books in the trilogy, Living on Earth has the several pages of color plates in the middle. I always like it when they do that. And speaking of pictures, take a look at that cover. Beautiful painting of hummingbirds by naturalist Ernst Haeckel, who created art forms in nature, which I have and have been meaning to review someday. I think all three covers are great. Here's kind of a funny fact. The artwork for Other Minds and Living on Earth were done by Ernst Haeckel, while the cover for Metazoa was done by William Gould. However, guess who coined the word metazoa? It was Ernst Haeckel. Pretty funny, but I thought it seems Peter Godfrey-Smith was really like Ernst Haeckel. Which one do you guys think is best? I have to go with Living on Earth just because it's so eye-catching with all the colors. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Philosophy is a subject that I consider myself to be not very educated in, but I do want to try to make more of an effort to read more of it. And I do enjoy and very much appreciate the opportunity to spend some time in the mind of a philosopher like Peter Godfrey-Smith. A book like this really makes me appreciate just how amazing it is that humans have come to the point where we've developed this system of writing and printing on paper that allows us to hear the thoughts of the experts and to know the information that they thought was so important that they made it into books. You ever stop and think about how incredible that is? I mean, yeah, of course, there's no shortage of quacks and charlatans out there who also write books, but exposure to them is part of the human experience as well. So anyway, if you love philosophy, nature, the ocean, biology, or just exploring questions, definitely check out Other Minds, Metazoa, and Living on Earth by Peter Godfrey-Smith.